Welcome to the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Apologies for being a few minutes late, but I'm riding solo today. And you know, if you've been here for this show, when it's just me and you are my co-host, I like to have a lot of presentation, a lot of graphics. I'm not going to call it filler because I actually think it's pretty good, but one dude talking for an hour, less interesting than if I can have different voices as a part of the show. So what we're doing today, I'm very excited for this. I'm going to attempt to describe every Penn State battle that we've learned about so far with the adjoining quotes and information from Penn State head coach James Franklin and his staff about how that camp battle is going. So you don't have to take my word for it. You're going to hear from all of the coaches about the different camp battles and where we stand right now halfway through camp. We'll also have your camp update coming up on today's show. So as I like to say before, as I've said before, it's a very nutrient-dense episode. Lots of information. I'm excited to bring all of this to you in, 1080p. And, of course, today's show is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. They carry all the gear you need from top brands at prices you'll love. Now shopping at Academy Sports is more convenient than ever. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills. Plus, big old plus, free and easy curbside pickup on academysports.com. As I said, still doing some pre-flight checks. So if I'm a little bit distracted here and doing some umming and uhing and kind of filtering through some of these things, there's a lot of graphics. So we're going to get to all that today on the show. I would love to be so professional. I would love to never mention the things going on behind the scenes. And, like the duck that's paddling and that metaphor of it's just so calm and serene. But that's not how this show goes. It just isn't. But I think we're still going to have a good show. So, as always, as I said before, you in the chat are my co-host on today's show. So if you got any thoughts, questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll get to a lot of those as we can throughout the show. Somebody who I almost called up today to be like, hey, you want to be on the show? Landon Tangwell, clean shave. Joke's on you. This is a day old. I just go with the safety razor, so it gets it nice and clean, so I actually get 2 days out of it. But I was a little nervous coming on the show today because I really wanted that actual clean dome. So let's see what we got going on in the chat. Of course, Eggman is here. Football, very good. Yes, football is very good, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Of course, I'm going to say this here to start the show. Please like the video. I haven't said this at the beginning of the show to remind people in quite a bit of time. We're in the thick of it, right? So we are in camp. There's all kinds of information, and we're in season. We're making hay. If you want to help us put some of that hay in the barn, please like the video and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on YouTube. If you didn't, you maybe missed James Franklin's press conference, which went up at like 7:30 last night. We get that up as soon as we can each night, so there's not a really set time. It's just immediately as soon as possible. We'll have Jim Knowles talking today. If you can hear him, going to be working on that. We'll also have an extended conversation with Marcus Hagans. We're going to be writing about that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Very different dude than he was in the spring. And very interested to bring that to you as well. So that video, we're going to do coordinators and coaches, maybe even a little bit of Kyron Hudson later today. So look out for that video. And the best way to know when those things are going up is to subscribe here to the channel and enable notifications so that when you do, you know exactly when these things come out live. You get the notification that we're going live here at 10. You know when we have breaking news or highlights or any of those things as we get the highlights out to you throughout camp. We're going to get you those highlights, though. So let's start with Penn State practice and what we saw yesterday.
You gotta win, goddamn Tyler. You gotta win.
David Greeter in the chat, he says, what up, T. Frank? His mom and he are watching this morning. Hello, Mrs. David Greeter, ready for Penn State football. Hit the like and subscribe button. I always appreciate when you guys help me do the heavy lifting here on the show. You guys have better memory than I do. Like, I have a terrible memory, so appreciate you helping me out with that. So what do we see yesterday? Of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. My full thoughts and our notebook up over there. Going to get to some of the things that I thought were interesting that I wanted to share today. Maybe even some stuff I didn't really get too in-depth in that particular article, I spent a lot of time with the linebackers. And here's the thing. Watching the linebackers doing the drills they did, I didn't get a whole lot, in terms of understanding this information about this. Certain players looked better at the drills than others, which you're going to see through here. Tony Rojas looks great. Dom DeLuca looks great. Going through the drill, and when I say they look great, it's not just that they're physically good, or it's that they're going through the drill and they're executing it at a level that looks like what Dan Connor did. And there's the right posture, there's the right body lean, there's the right emphasis with hands and natural fluidity through the movement. They look like they're doing the drill right. Anthony Specca, as you can see, also looks good going through drills. So we're going to get to this a little bit later when we go into the camp update and some of the camp battles. Penn State's got a lot of really good-looking linebackers. There's guys that look like they can play. There's guys that are athletic and they flash. Alex Tash is one of those guys as a freshman. Anthony Specca is somebody who generally stands out in these one-on-one drills that we get to see. So physically, like Nate and I talked about yesterday, you see a lot of guys that look good. And that's really what you can get from a drill like this. Are they going through the drill? Do they look good? You can be the judge here if you want of who looks good and who doesn't through these drills. To me, the interesting thing was watching Dan Connor. Even Jim Knowles talked about this yesterday, where Dan, as you can see here, Dan Connor played in the NFL, right? So he's 39 maybe, he might be 40, I don't know exactly where. He's right in that age. He's still in the age of he's the best athlete on the field. If you and I are out there, if everybody is out there, he's still an NFL football player, just insanely athletic, but 40. So when he goes through these drills, he looks like a linebacker going through the drills. I think that's highly underrated, where you've got a guy who can show you with his body how to do something. He can show you the correct posture, the correct intensity, the ability to go and actually demonstrate what he wants you to do is huge. Jim Knowles said it way better than I did. But that's one of the things I've noticed about Dan Connor. Super active coach. And it's not just that he's an active coach and then he's physically moving around. I think he brings a certain level of intensity without being, I think, aggressively negative with players, So there's that, I really want to get this information to you. He's intensely communicative, but he isn't demeaning or any of those things where I think guys can really learn from him. I've enjoyed watching him coach this summer, watching him with some of the prospect camps, and now here checking out what he was doing with the linebackers. Because in a certain way, he just really gets into it. So the linebackers look good. Amari Campbell usually stands out. Interestingly, he's going through all of the drills last, which I think, given what you expect from football players and who's leading, who are the leaders, and the leaders always go through first, and then everyone else follows. I do think there's a certain amount of learning from Amari Campbell he's still a transfer. Maybe the defense and playing football he understands, but how do the coaches want me to do this drill? How is it that they, I want to sit back and make sure I know what I'm doing before I go through the drill. So there is a little bit of sitting back and learning. He's not asserting himself as a dominant leader force, I guess. But at the same time, every time he goes through a drill, you notice him. Gets a lot of praise for doing things the right way. So order in camp, I don't think necessarily matters. I think it's important for guys in the middle of that group, which we're going to get to here in the camp battles. It's important for those guys to go through early or to try and establish some sort of presence there in sort of the everything's being observed and everything's a competition. There is that aspect for some of these guys in the middle of the pack, but I don't think it's a universal thing of your leaders go first, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of an aside when going through some of these highlights that you're going to see here from either the quarterbacks, running backs. Now, there are some important things when it comes to going through the drills with certain players, but there's there's some context to it. Tight ends. Got a chance to see Andrew Rappelier run some routes. Generally, if I was going to characterize how he's been coming back from his injury, he's been coming back from his injury. There's no limitations on him, but when you look at Khalil Dinkins and you look at Luke Reynolds, they're just great movers, right? So there's a little bit of, maybe he's just a little bit behind as he's recovering from that injury. He had, I think, some tough moments early in camp that we've seen. Now, again, it's unfair to say what we've seen is all of it, But when we've seen him, maybe a little bit of sluggishness through his transitions, a little bit of maybe wasn't moving as well in the run blocking drills we saw earlier. So I think he's coming back slowly, but still in the top group of tight ends, still going to be on the field. But if we're talking about where he is in that group, he's in the top 3. But I think, we're not going to talk about the spoiler alert, we're not going to be talking about the tight end battle later in this conversation because, some of those things maybe are either obvious, maybe we wrote about them over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, or we're talking about them here where there's not a direct quote to attribute to anybody. Aller, he's looked pretty good. He's looked quite sharp. They've been working a lot of throws and a lot of things where he maybe struggled with these last year and is looking pretty good in terms of accuracy and just comfort in throwing the ball on the money, on target, and on time. Nothing's perfect. It is training camp. But I think he's just been good. We haven't talked about him a whole lot. I wanted to mention Drew Aller because, hey, Drew Aller's the starting quarterback for this team, and we're focusing more on QB2, running back 3, the defense, receivers, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to make sure that we talk about that. The other thing is yesterday, I think that we got into a period now with load management for the receivers. And I know that sounds like maybe load management is too politically charged of a word in sports, but it was 93 degrees yesterday. They were emphasizing hydration, making sure guys were getting through practice without dropping a ton of weight and getting weak and losing steam. So they were mitigating for the heat, but I also think that we're halfway through camp and they started taking the receivers. They do this late in the season as well, where they will have the receivers just run the transition at the top of the stem and then the route. So the route stem is the 5, 10, 15 yards where you're running in a straight line before you've determined, hey, what route is this? Breaking in, breaking out, breaking on a 45-degree angle, come back, whatever it might be. The route stem, that's all the same. It should all be the same. So instead of practicing that, they're practicing the transition, which is I'd say the most important part of the route. That's where you gain your separation. So they've been working a lot of that into and then out of that. And we see that usually late in the season. I don't know if it's because of where we are in camp, but I do think that was an emphasis for them in the one-on-one periods. And that's an important thing the individual periods. And that's something that we should kind of outline is we get to see a certain part of camp and a certain part of practice. And it's usually individual period where everyone wants to see the one-on-ones. Penn State hasn't given us any one-on-ones with receivers and DBs. Yeah, me too. We'd love to see that. That's been a common request here on the channel. We get to see what we get to see, and typically we get to see one contact period, between the offense and the defense in camp before they ask us to leave. And the receivers in these one-on-one periods before they get to teamwork, which is what happens when we leave, they're doing this. Now, they're running full routes later, right, when they're doing install or they're doing 7-on-7 or anything like that. So it's just this early part of practice, and I feel like it's important to say that because certain people are going to come away from this, the highlights and this conversation, and think Penn State's not running at camp, and it's just shaving back where they need to. And then about those pass protection drills, I think Tyke Hayes stood out. Tyke Hayes was with the top unit this past week. James Franklin has mentioned previously, I think last week, he said that top group, they've been cycling through who's the third running back day to day to see who's going to be, in that competition for who's going to be the guy come the end of training camp and the start of season. And he just looked good yesterday. There's some things that we saw in practice where I thought he looked good, and pass protection was one of them. He got a lot of praise from an assistant running back coach for a really good pass blocking drill. On the flip side, Nick Singleton is still a work in progress there. It's a technique thing, not necessarily a physical thing. It's just a technique thing. Stan Drayton is also big on pass protection. We talked a lot about what Stan Drayton likes out of his running backs. Very big on football IQ, understanding your assignment so that you can anticipate and be in position. And this is one of those areas where I think it's not a surprise. Nick Singleton has struggled with pass pro in his career. Certain running backs are good at it. Katron Allen is better. I also think that Katron's struggled a little bit in camp, and it might just be it's not the game. And because we've seen a lot of good stuff from Katron, but pass protection for the running backs has been hot and cold over the last 3 seasons. And I'd say really the last 2. Freshman running backs, I want to give them some credit. for their freshmen. But even last year as juniors, there was a little bit of inconsistency with Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and pass pro. And I think they're working on that and emphasizing it, because here's the thing. We had not seen those individual drills in 3 years. And that doesn't mean they weren't doing them when we weren't here, but we've seen them twice in the last month. And I think that's an important note, that they want to expand the protection emphasis beyond just the offensive line. So those are kind of our Penn State practice observations. And just to say, we're not going to be giving you the QB2 battle. We do have some observations about that. But that is what we noticed yesterday, and some of the context that we put behind that. We want to make sure that our subscribers, they still get a little bit of something. So join us right now. If you want to be one of those people, you want to learn about that QB2 battle and what we're seeing, who's separating, who's being a part of the top group, who is working more with the 2s and 3s. Well, you can join us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sign up for Blue White Illustrated today for just $1 for the first week, plus a complimentary year of access to The Athletic included. So check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. A lot of great stuff, not just from me, from Greg Pickle, Nate Bauer, our observations from yesterday, and of course, Nate's takes from what people had to say after practice. So check all that out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Steven says, A-Rob in the house. Yeah, Allen Robinson was there yesterday. And there's a very funny thing that happened after practice, and of course on the message board as well. The receivers were working on contested catches, and it's something they've been doing consistently throughout camp as one of the things that we've seen in these individual workout periods where they're working on, getting the hands off them and then high pointing the ball. And Allen Robinson is standing on the sideline watching the drill. James Franklin in the distance is walking in the background, and he shouts across the drill, jump ball king, the Penn State jump ball king. Lyric Samuel is the one going through the drill. Half of the media thought that was Lyric Samuel he was talking about when he was shouting over the drill to Allen Robinson. So somebody asked about it after practice, but there was more than one person at practice that thought James Franklin was talking about Lyric Samuel being the jump ball king. Because, they do the takeaway king, they do the touchdown king. Maybe to emphasize this, they're doing the jump ball king. But no, that was still and is and will be Allen Robinson until somebody dethrones him. We have not seen that player do that yet. But not it's not 187-pound, 6'5" freshman or 6'4" freshman Lyric Samuel. What else we got here in the chat? We're going to get into our depth chart preview in just a second. Eggman asks, surprise breakout upperclassman. Denai Dennis Sutton will blow T. Frank's mind in 2025 with quickness and dominance he hasn't heretofore imagined. So this is what Lan and I were talking about when we were sitting on the porch the other day, is that has not been Denai's game to this point in his career. He has been a power player, length, and, not being slow. It's a problem. Here's the problem. We talk about Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson, who are the nth degree of speed, who are the explosivest, most explosive. They are the EST of that particular style of play. Denai Dennis Sutton is not that, but that doesn't mean he is slow. And he has worked just like a couple of other guys we talked about. You can work on your speed if you're a good athlete. You can work on your speed. If you're you and me, there may be only so much you can do. So that's where I want to give Denai Dennis Sutton the opportunity to get better as a senior, is he can improve on those things if that's what he's working on. And it sounds like that's what he's been working on. I don't think he's going to be those guys, Abdul Carter, and kind of that transformational pass rusher from the speed perspective. But if you have the speed to threaten onto the outside, and you have the strength and the power to move, use that speed and then turn it into power, that's where you get some of these dominant pass rushers in the NFL that use those skills to be on that level of a pass rusher. We haven't seen it from Denai yet. And there's always that yet. Now, third year, heading into his fourth year, there are these conversations about, is it reasonable to expect a senior to dramatically change his gameplay? And the answer is no. Dramatically, no. Guys can play faster for mental development of understanding football to a much deeper degree and reacting more than thinking. Defensive end is a little bit of just you're reacting for the most part anyway. There's not as much thinking about that position as there is linebacker or safety where you're reading multiple things. D end is engage, look for the running back, shed, make sure you're not getting beat one way or another. Like, you need to have awareness, but you've got a very immediate task. Abdul Carter went from he didn't play as fast as he could at linebacker to playing unbelievably fast, partly because he's playing defensive end. There's more go, get ball. Denai has the opportunity to improve on those areas. And again, incremental improvement from a guy maybe who ran a 4.8 to running a high 4.7, low 4.6. I don't know, like, from a 40 time standpoint kind of measurement of athletic improvement, there's an opportunity. If you're asking me about somebody other than Dennis Sutton, who's an upperclassman that has the opportunity for a breakout, let me think about this for a second because I'm a little bit. Here's the problem: is like Khalil Dinkins is the answer. Khalil Dinkins is the answer, but we've been not talking about him enough. We've been definitely not talking about him on this show so much that I don't know if it's going to be like a surprise. We've been clearly outlining since May, June, that he's going to be the guy at tight end. Maybe even before then during spring practice. So I'm not surprised if Khalil Dinkins has a breakout year, maybe nationally, if you want to go to that particular side of things. And then I'm just going to continue to say Tony Rojas, because the opportunity for him to have a breakout campaign as a junior, given the injury situation and his talent level, I think is probable or above average opportunity. So, going in on that as much as I can. Let's see. Who else we got here in the chat wants to talk about it? A lot of you guys, here's the problem. We have such a smart audience that you guys are skipping ahead on the test. I already see some of the quotes that we're going to be talking about here on the show. So let's just get into it. Let's get into our camp battle. Let's get into here. First off, I want to make sure that we discuss how this is all going to go from a information delivering standpoint, because we have quotes from James Franklin, quotes from Jim Knowles, and quotes from I'm looking for it here, making sure we have it, and also from Terry Smith talking about different position battles so far in camp. And we're going to give you those as the evidence for here's where that particular battle is right now. So it's not going to be my opinion on a lot of this stuff. It's going to be here's what they are saying and how we're going to present that. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you that if you want to go see the results of these camp battles, if you want to go to the game, we are almost 2 weeks away from Nevada. Go to Tixman Gym. If you've been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets, Jim at TixmanGym.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchase is guaranteed. That's a big word. Guaranteed. It should be. Like, all tickets should be guaranteed. But if you're buying them on eBay, if you're buying them on a secondary source, you're buying them from a place that, like, hey, Venmo me the money and then I'll fax you the tickets. Like, don't gamble. Like, I'm not here to be your dad and tell you maybe don't sports gamble or whatever you want to do there, but definitely don't gamble with things that you don't need to gamble with, and go to PSU Tixman Gym for your tickets. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your 2025 season tickets now. We're almost there. Go to TixmanGym.com or email Jim at TixmanGym@gmail.com academysportsandoutdoors.com. And as you may have guessed, this show is also brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. It carries all the gear you need from the top brands, all at prices you'll love. And now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. Everyone loves convenience. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases, so you don't have to get into a fight about it later when you bring it home. And you've got one hex wrench, and you need to have, you need to have at least 4 more tools that you don't have. They'll take care of that for you on most bikes and grills. Plus, free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. Want to save even more every day? Who doesn't? Especially right now, who doesn't want to save more every day? It's back to school season. Open and use an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card to get 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there. Okay, so as I said, there's a lot of clips here, and I'm just crossing my fingers. I had to make them all, plus everything you just saw earlier today. We're going to hope that all of this comes together, and we're going to start with the wide receivers because this is an interesting position that everyone wants to know the most about. We'll start with the receivers and how this battle has been going so far. Interestingly, we haven't gotten a whole lot on how the receiver hierarchy is going, but I do think we have a pretty clear top wide receiver. And butting up into that very quickly has been another transfer, Trevor Pena. So here's James Franklin talking this week about Trevor Pena and then Kyron Hudson when asked.
Yeah, so he's more explosive. Done a really good job embracing our strength program. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten more explosive. All his numbers are up. His speed numbers are up. His quickness numbers are up. His jumping numbers are up. And then on the field, he's just super mature, really consistent, very good route runner, sudden and quick. So a lot of the things that you saw on tape from a production standpoint, we've seen it, but I think he's gotten faster and more explosive. So he's been really good. He don't say a whole lot. Very mature. Has fit in really well culturally, and we're very pleased with him. Yeah, very similar to Pena. I think kind of a important point there is they were both captains at their last schools, right? So very mature, very consistent, totally different body type, big, strong, physical, contested catch guy. You saw that on film. We've seen that all camp. He's more sudden than I thought he was going to be as a route runner, and just a savvy vet that, we're very, very glad we have him. He's wearing the number 1. He's earned that.
So to recap, he was number 11 in the spring. Now he's number 1 on offense as a receiver. And that's actually to derail this with a kind of an aside. I wanted to ask James Franklin there, is that a new thing where the number 1 receiver gets the number 1? Because, we've seen that previously where the top guy on a lot of teams wears 1. Or is that just a preference by most receivers, so that's how that works? Or is it like 0 on special teams, where it's a jersey you give to somebody because they've earned that position, that respect from their teammates? I don't know. That's something we got to ask at some point this year. But that's interesting because obviously he earned that, meaning he wasn't given it right away. Kyron Hudson's your number 1 receiver. How about that? Kyron Hudson, number 1 receiver, and I think just watching the way he's performed and the way James Franklin talked about him, Trevor Pena is the number 2 in a non-linear format or in a linear format, right? So we're not talking about positions here. It's just which guys are 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The transfers, I think it's fair to say, are in that top group of receivers where you've got, Devontae Ross is a part of that. But the 2 that have stood out during camp to me and what we've seen and what James Franklin talked about and what we've asked about are Trevor Pena and Kyron Hudson. And it's important, Kyron Hudson talked about this later, of he's had time to develop a relationship and chemistry with Drew Aller because he's been here since December. He's been healthy and a part of everything since December and has been putting all that work in to be that guy. So there you go. You got your top receivers, your number 1 receiver, your not surprising but impressive number 2. And another thing that I think is really interesting about these players And some of the opinions we had about them is that Penn State was able to make significant strides with their athleticism this offseason. I don't know if it was in this clip we talked about that James Franklin was talking here, but he mentioned he was more, Kyron Hudson was more explosive, more agile than they were expecting off of what they saw on film. And I've noticed a little bit of that myself. Still not going to be he doesn't have the overall profile of a number one receiver going in the first round of the NFL draft or anything like that, but there were some comparisons to Mitchell Tinsley, and I don't think that's fair at this point. There's a little more there, right? He's a little bit more well-rounded than Mitchell Tinsley, who's a great possession receiver, but maybe lacked that explosiveness, that pop in his movement skills to create separation and be, a number one receiver for a team. Not necessarily a number one in the sense of unguardable, general football sense. This guy's a wide receiver one on any team. And then the same thing they said about Trevor Pena, who got more explosive and faster. And again, I've noticed that in camp as well, where he looks a little bit more in and out of his breaks, a little more explosive. I haven't got to see him run a lot of long routes. I haven't got to see him run a whole lot, so I don't know about the deep speed, but that transition skill and then the pop in and out of his breaks, I think has improved. Just from what I saw on film, watching him at Syracuse to what we see now, there is an improvement in that player. What is the percentage? I don't know that yet. Again, we haven't seen these things in game scenarios, but if you're a Penn State fan, and I think if you're Marcus Hagans, you're very happy about this particular group. And I meant to mention this during our camp update. We talked to Marcus Hagans yesterday. Just an infinitely different person. He mentioned how he's having fun in camp. He was happy. I don't remember if he said exactly that he was happy, but the things that he loved, there's competition. He loves competition, and not just that there's competition, at his position for position battles or with the DBs, but that there is the spirit of competition and people who are engaged in it. There are guys that are fighting hard and straining to make plays, not just as receivers, but as blockers. And I think that's the mentality he wanted from this group the whole time. And I think it's taken him a couple years to get there, but he's got 3 senior transfers and a bunch of young players that have, I guess, the right mentality of what he's been looking for. So overall on the receiver position, good stuff. I think encouraging. I don't know how encouraged you should be. Like, again, the other end of what happens when they go up against good cornerbacks. We'll find out. Opposing good cornerbacks. They go up against good cornerbacks in camp. But, again, we haven't gotten to see those one-on-ones since the spring. So I don't think we're going to either. I should also say this. I meant to say this yesterday. I want to make sure I say it before I forget. So we are now in that transition between the end of camp and the start of the season. And so typically what happens at our next practice, either then or the week after, is they're going to start breaking into the 2 deep and then the practice squad. And I don't know if it's going to be next week, but we're going to see less each time. We're going to see less one-on-ones. We're going to see more individual drills. We're going to see shorter periods of practice because they're going to start ramping up. We're working on this, and it's going directly on the football field, and we don't want you to see that because that would be an obviously stupid thing for us to let you see what plays we're going to be running against Nevada. So that's kind of where we are. We're going to be getting into season mode where we get to see just a little bit less. I could be wrong. They could be this year deciding to give us more access and give us a little more one-on-ones during the season. I doubt it, but I don't think at this point we're going to be able to see any of those receiver DB one-on-ones that you all want to see. Sorry. Let's talk about the right tackle battle. The right tackle battle between Nolan Rucci, Anthony Donko. I don't know how much of a battle it's been, if I'm being painfully honest here. James Franklin, though, did not want to, this is a week ago, did not want to give any indication of which way it was going. Here's what he had to say about Anthony Donko and his return from injury in the beginning.
Like always, we'd love to have our starters at every position decided as early as possible, but even when we do that, we're still going to rotate those guys because we want to create flexibility, and even if the starting five may look like X, if there's an injury, we're going to have to move people around to get our best five guys on the field. So I get your point. He's looked good. He's a talented guy, as you know. He's athletic enough to play tackle, but he's also 323 pounds, so he's got enough physical size, strength, power to get movement at guard. So he's kind of what you want. You can't get enough of those type of guys that create position flexibility. So he's getting a ton of reps at both, but we're not at a point to make a decision. We've only had really one scrimmage the other night in the stadium, but we've got a ton of work, but not really ready to make a decision.
So since then, I believe they've gone and had another scrimmage at Beaver Stadium. So more information. We did not ask about that this week because we asked about it last week. And, not that we have a plan. There's no collective plan for the media. But we asked about the right tackle position. It seems like you only get 10 minutes with James Franklin after practice. Maybe some of the other things that we want to learn, we might ask about those. But every time we've seen Anthony Donko, he's been playing right guard. So take that for what you will. There's less information, but there's more information. There's a little bit more reading between the lines. But, as we talked about yesterday in the show with Nate, he's coming back from injury. We haven't seen as many one-on-ones with the starters when it came to those half-field line drills that we were talking about at the beginning of camp. I believe he's been cleared for contact, but that's that gray area of we see him go through contact of a certain kind, thud, but not necessarily full contact with the D-line. So feels like it's going to be a right tackle for Nolan Rucci, advantage at this point, and then we'll see how the rest of it goes. Let's get into RB3. So our running back 3 conversation, I asked about James Franklin about this yesterday. I mentioned Tyke Hayes was with the top group at practice when we were there. He's looked good, but Franklin had mentioned previously that they have cycled through who's going to be the starter, who's going to be the third running back each week to practice in those individuals with the starting quarterbacks and with starting offensive linemen, etc., and then who's going to get those reps in camp. They've also been giving those guys reps with the ones because they're giving Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, the veteran rest that they deserve because there's only so much more you're going to learn about those top two. So where does all of that stand right now after Tuesday night's practice with the running back 3 competition?
Yeah, I think it's still wide open. We've had some inconsistency there in terms of who's practicing, who's not, guys getting dinged up and things like that. So I think still wide open.
So there you go. There's your running back 3 conversation. This probably the murkiest one, and James Franklin, honestly, there's no conversation yet about who's leading there because I think there's a lot of different factors at play. He mentioned guys having availability. Last week he talked about Cam Wallace still working back from a confidence, emotion kind of space from his injury, and then of course the physical return. So you got a freshman as part of the conversation too. So there's just layers to this particular conversation. I don't want to belabor the point, so let's get to the next one. We're going to shift over to the defense, talk from the back to the front about the defense, and we'll start with the nickel and safety battle. We're going to lump these two together because of the way that they have kind of influenced each other. Zion Tracy and the battle at the nickel, and then the outside cornerback battle, how that's going. We talked to Terry Smith last week, and here's what he had to say about his cornerbacks, specifically the battle between Davian Collins and Elliot Washington, and then the nickel battle, which kind of is wrapped up as soon as Zion Tracy was
They're
out.
a starter for us in my mindset. And, right now, Elliot and AC are battling to start opposite of AJ. And whoever gets the first snap at Nevada, they're going to play equal reps until one just emerges and says, you know what, I'm just far better than the other. But those guys are going to play. We can count on them. Both of them can help us win the games that we want to win. And Zion is solidified the nickel spot. He's healthy, looks great. Now we're trying to build depth.
So the cornerback room, this is what we've been talking about essentially. The blueprint of what they've done previously is you've got one starter, A.J. Harris, who they're talking about a lot in the same way that they did Joey Porter Jr. During his redshirt senior season. A.J. Harris is that guy this year, starting opposite of A.J. Harris, who's proven he's the number one corner, which he was last year in his first year on campus. Really impressive football player. And then the other side was Johnny Dixon, Kalen King for Joey Porter Jr., and it was a battle each week for them to have starting reps, and they basically alternated who the starter was each game. So, week 1 it was one guy, week 2 was another guy, and if somebody got banged up, then obviously that changed the rotation, but they played equal snaps, and they were both equally involved in the program. I don't think that's going to change. Terry Smith said there, until one of them proves that they're going to be obviously better than the other. Having watched both these guys play, I don't think that there is a significant difference between their talent, that if they both play to the top of their talent, there will be a separation. Now, Elliott Washington is a little bit bigger and stronger, but Davian Collins has elite athleticism. His feet, I think, are on the same level as Daquan Hardy a couple years ago, but he's a little bit stronger and a little bit longer as a corner, so he's got, NFL potential. Both these guys, all three of these guys have NFL potential. And so I don't know that there's a separation. I genuinely don't think that there is a ton of separation between those two. So this battle is going to go all year long, and we're going to see all three of them play. And that's what he was saying, is they're going to play starting reps all season long. So, it's an immaterial conversation, but the part that was important is Zion Tracy is the slot corner. End of story. He's going to be the guy playing in the nickel. And I do think that changes what we see from this defense, because it's going to look more like a 3-quarterback set than if you had a safety there, than if you had a Colin Dinkins or a King Mack, who was part of that in the spring. You're going to have more characteristics of what we saw last year as opposed to this year. Now, Jim Knowles gave Zion Tracy a lot of praise that he could do it all. I'm a little skeptical just because of the way he tackled last year. I don't think he lacked effort. So let me just clarify. Zion Tracy never lacked effort or intensity in his tackling. So if the technique has improved and maybe his awareness in the game has slowed down for him a little bit and he throws himself in there, then, I stand corrected or stand updated as to what he can do. So that's how that has played out. And that shifted King Mack back over into the safety position. Is there a resolution there? Yesterday, Jim Knowles said no.
No, we're not close yet. There's still a lot that remains to be seen. They're both having good camps, and I think a guy who's been on the rise is Belgrave Shorter. We're going to play the best guy. You play 2 safeties, you're going to play the best 2. So I think all 3 of those guys are in competition for that second spot.
So if you couldn't hear that over all of the levels I had to jack up to hear him, there is no separation between Day-Day Lane and King Mack. Those guys are battling. They like both of them. And Antoine Belgrave Shorter is a guy that has emerged in the safety competition as well. So just how all of that played out in the spring, Mack wasn't out there for us to watch him play, but you saw Dejon Lane was playing the strong safety, and you had Belgrave Shorter playing the free safety behind Zakee Wheatley. Now, here's the important thing. We have the conversation about linebacker. We have the conversation about safety. All these guys have skills that can play either position. And so the differentiation between the two is less important than when you played 15 years ago. But just like receiver, everybody's got a home base. Everyone's got skills that fit one of those positions better than the other. So you got 2 strong safeties in Lane and Mack who are better in the box, physical hitters, tenacious tacklers. But Belgrave Shorter's a big dude, 200 pounds, 6'1". He's got those skills. He was playing more free safety, which would be backing up Zakee Wheatley, who I'm assuming, based on what we saw, you can only change so much, right? Like, you can only shift so many of these things that if he's going to be the Caleb Downs for this defense, he's going to be playing the free safety position, the field safety. And as a former corner, it makes sense that Belgrave Shorter would be playing there. But that doesn't mean guys can't move around, right? So Belgrave Shorter, I think, is in line for playing time. And guys, even at Ohio State, they moved guys around the formation. They substituted safeties, especially at that boundary position. So there's movement for all of them. But the primary battle, as we've been understanding it, is for that strong safety position next to Zakee Wheatley. So hope that's right still. Because that's how we've been looking at all this stuff. Let's get into the linebacker conversation, which we got more clarity about, some crystal clear clarity from the staff yesterday. Getting into our linebackers, we talked about how they all look good, right? So they all look like they can play. Anthony Speca going through positional drills looks good. Alex Tash, when he's going through positional drills, looks good. But what happens when you add in the different math of how all these things affect you as the defense from what the offense is trying to do to you? There's a lot of new stuff that you did not see in high school. Even if you're Anthony Speca, things you didn't fully grasp last year. And James Franklin talked about it. Okay, so the offense line, you're in this defense. Let's say you're playing cover 3, right? So you got 1 deep safety, 2 deep corners, and there's 4, my math right? 4 guys underneath. Now, that's how you line up. What if you got a 3-by-1 set with 3 receivers on one side? What if they run all 5 receivers into the boundary, which you're going to see if you're Andy Kotelnicki? How do you pick through in your brain which is your guy? Now add in motion and shifts. Do you have it all still? Do you know where your zone is supposed to be? Do you know what your matchup is of who you're expecting to come through your zone based on the formation and the routes expected on first down or second down? These are the I've got to play fast because I know this. I know all this information pre-snap, and I'm not thinking about it, so then I just go do my job. For some of these young guys, that's been where the battle is, and the top 3 are pretty clear to James Franklin because outside of the defense, these guys have played enough football that they know a lot of those concepts and things outside of what Jim Knowles wants them to do in their role. Here are the top 3 players as he's described.
Yeah, the 3 most experienced inside guys, obviously Rojas, DeLuca and Amari are the 3 most experienced guys, so we'll see how that goes, but we're working towards it.
Campbell seemed like he could take on that task despite having a kind of a short run up to the season.
Not really. I mean, when I say not really, it's not really a short run up for him because in my mind he did it at North Carolina. We got a new defense. They're all learning a new defense, so it's about the same for everybody, right?
The question there was specifically who can wear the green dot, be the Mike linebacker, and Mike meaning communication, and also middle linebacker. I'm assuming that's how those 2 guys together? I don't know. But anyway, those are the 3 guys that can wear a green dot for Penn State, according to James Franklin. That's how the question was couched to him. Because Amari Campbell called the defense at North Carolina last year. And again, we talk about things you know about defense. Some of these things are translatable defense to defense, and then it's the tweaks of the coaching of I want you to do it this way as opposed to this way, but you understand the general concept. I'm interested to find out how are you going to have 2 guys with the green dot on the field at the same time? Because you can't do that. You can't have more than 1 radio out there. So if Tony Rojas and those 3 are your guys that can call the defense for you, you can't have them wearing the same helmet. You can't have Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas out there with Mike linebacker helmets with a radio. You can't have Tony and Dom DeLuca out there together with those helmets. So do all of them have 2 helmets? Or do you not worry as much about that and you say, let's just say Dom DeLuca and Amari Campbell are your Mike linebackers, and if one of them is always going to be on the field and Rojas doesn't have a mic, and if he's out there calling the plays maybe on third down, it's just hand signals. There's just, to me, that these are the kind of formatting decisions that don't actually impact a lot of these things that I'm curious about of how that all is going to work out. But as far as who's next, maybe linebacker 4, maybe linebacker 5, has anyone separated themselves to be a part of the conversation here? Jim Knowles, he doesn't mince words ever, but he definitely didn't mince words here.
Nobody I can count on yet. You're right. We got those 3, and I can count on and trust those guys. And then there's competition. Keon, Speca, Tash, again, for a true freshman, has shown some things that make you think he's going to be very good in the future. Is he going to be good enough to help us this year? I don't know yet, but he is in competition. And all those guys, we need someone or all of them to separate themselves.
So, like we said, guys look good in practice. I think physically there are more players you can count on, but it's the mental side of things that we described earlier. Here's what the people are saying. T. Frank is a fountain of PSU current football knowledge. Yeah, current is the important thing here. If you ask me things about history in football and Penn State football history, even stuff I covered, I will probably not remember everything very well. Things in the now, I feel like I got a pretty good handle of. Eggman says, this is one of the most informative BWI shows I've ever seen. Tell your friends. Tell them to subscribe here to the YouTube channel because we like to do stuff like this, help you get that information, help you also enjoy it. I don't know. Hopefully the graphics help you out a little bit of keeping your attention because, again, me talking for 50 minutes, I'd get bored. My wife zones out all the time. So, like, I want to make sure there's some other people talking here to, like, hey, he's done ranting. So let's rant a little more. I think we got 2 positions left. Defensive tackle is where we're going to go next. 4, 5, and 6. Now, we talked about this on the show yesterday. I wrote about this last week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I think fairly clearly Penn State has their top 4. And the question is, who's going to be that 6th guy with a couple of guys separating themselves? Here's what James Franklin had to say last week.
Talk and buzz around Xavier. Blanding is twitchy and as athletic as that we have at the position, and is really taking a step right now. And then there's a group of like 3 guys that are battling for those next 2 spots. I probably should have included Wafel too. Wafel is the other one that is doing some really nice things. And then there's that group of 3 guys that are all battling. Liam, Cook, Randy are all battling kind of, for those next spots. So we feel good probably about those top 4 to 5 guys. And then there's a battle for that 6th defensive tackle.
So there you go. James Franklin saying that they've got their top 5, which I think is really where they want to be in terms of the depth that they want for this team. Ty Blanding, the light came on. I think those spring reps probably helped him out a lot, being the number 1 defensive tackle that was available with both Alonzo Ford and Zane Durant, not being a part of spring football in an intense way. And then, of course, Gilliam being a part of that. That was the given. Xavier Gilliam was the given, as Franklin said. But the guy who emerged, I think that's really important here outside of Blanding is Owen Wafel. Those 2 guys making a move. Blanding, you hoped that would be the case, but you didn't want to count on it. And then Wafel, I think, is the pleasant surprise of this particular group. And again, I've described this of what I saw of him, at least in the spring. He's going to be a role player, and he's going to give you good reps, especially against the run. Are you going to get elite pass rush from him? Maybe. I did not see that. I definitely didn't see that in the blue-white game. Hard for a defensive tackle to do that anyway. Hard for a redshirt freshman, but also with his skill set, I think he can play early downs and be a physical presence out there. We'll see what else he can give, but Penn State's got their 5 defensive tackles, and then 2 kids, 1 wife, all PSU. Love him some Randy Adarica. Yeah, I got 3 young guys that are battling for a 6th spot. That's a good place to be in camp when now the conversation about your defensive tackle room, unlike linebacker where you're still looking for maybe a 4th guy, you're looking for your 6th defensive tackle, and it's a freshman. So good stuff there. Good stuff there for Penn State in the defensive tackle room, something I know Penn State fans were terrified about early in the year as opposed to what's going to happen. The way, too, that James Franklin is talking about this group, I think that it's not just that they've got a separation of 5, but also that the 5 are pretty good. Like they feel pretty good about that group. And that was my biggest concern as well. Last offseason, when all those players came back, that you were not going to get a lot of development for some of these young guys because they're just, you had this downward pressure of all these seniors, redshirt seniors, 6-year players staying at Penn State. And so are those young guys getting time to develop? Are they getting enough reps and snaps to be ready to go the next year? And it seems like, yeah, actually, they're doing a pretty good job. I probably should have done this one a lot earlier because this was the news yesterday. Let's talk about Penn State's defensive end battle. And, of course, the top 2, Zariah Fisher and Denia Dennis Sutton, who we talked about earlier in the show. That's not who we're talking about. Who's number 3? Who's number 4? Who are the guys that are standing out of that position that are going to be the depth players, maybe some pass rush specialists or guys that can be a part of the program in whatever way, shape, or form. And James Franklin, we've talked about this before. It's now out in the open. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We were telling you a lot of buzz for Chaz Coleman. Here is the out loud buzz that James Franklin gave us in the longer clip, about 90 seconds of him talking about how much he likes Chaz Coleman.
Yeah, I think we're all surprised. I mean, we knew he was a talent, right? Tall, long, athletic, high-level basketball player, quarterback. His senior year, he moves to defensive end, blows up, gets some offers we offer, he commits. Everybody else still comes after him. Got a great family, and they held true. And, we still didn't know what we were going to get because you only play 1 year of defensive ends. So it's a long way from the quarterback position. But his physicality and his explosiveness and his motor has been impressive. Everybody's talking about him. It's early, but he's flashed. And there's a lot of excitement about his ability. He's got up to 250 pounds in a very, very short period of time. He's gained like 25 pounds since being on campus, and he's still skinny, which is the exciting thing. But he's flashed, and he is an awesome kid. Extremely humble. I went around and asked all the freshmen, which I do every year, of how they see themselves as red, yellows, or greens in terms of redshirting or playing right away. And he said he was a yellow, and everybody in the room's kind of looking at him like, dude, you ain't a yellow.
Yeah, so tangent here. Another one of T. Frank's tangents. I need to get a little thing for that. I regret selling my Chaz Coleman stock this spring. I feel here's the thing. As James Franklin, and this is kind of the rationale, as James Franklin pointed out, everyone knew he was talented. You watch this kid play D-end, and it's like if he can get big enough, that guy can play as a freshman. But it's all the other things that are a part of that. How do you translate to the position? Do you develop over time? What are the things you've seen? And I remember on the recruiting show saying this is a guy who could play his freshman season if all things work out for him. And then I sold all that stock. I was like, all right, let's take a step back. Because you don't want to be on an island about a freshman who you've seen play 4 games. Shouldn't have done that. Should have just kept my mouth shut. Should have been quiet because I could have been like, I told you I was there first. And yeah, I gave up that ground. I ceded that ground on Chaz Coleman. To the larger point here, as far as no one cares as much about that, is who's going to play. James Franklin talked about green-lit freshmen, guys who are going to play this year that they think right now can contribute for the full season and burn their red shirts. Chaz Coleman. Also important here, Ivan Kamaju. Both of these guys, bigger freshmen, physical, stockier, stronger body types. Now, that's specifically that they're asking for who are the freshmen that are going to burn the red shirt. That doesn't mean that they're going to play above Jalen Harvey, and it doesn't mean they're going to play above Malachi Williams. But it does mean they're going to play with those guys, and that is, I think, an important and really impressive thing, especially for Coleman, who arrived in May. Had Chaz Coleman gotten here in January, I would have not sold a single share of Chaz Coleman stock. But the fact that they're pushing, I think, is really interesting because, and I asked Jim Knowles about this. Do you have to have guys that can be complete to play at defensive end, meaning they're big enough and strong enough that they can hold the point of attack, they can play the run, or can you work with guys that maybe are more speed rushers? And he said, yes, you can work with anybody. If they've got a trait we can use, then they can play. But it does seem like the big physical dudes that are here first are getting they're getting some run, as opposed to maybe some of the smaller guys who are twitchier and athletic have in the past. I do think it's not a one-to-one thing, but having watched his defense, the defensive line has to control the flow of the game, and that includes the run game. So I think that those players who are, Chaz Coleman being 250, Ivan Kamaju, we talked about maybe as a defensive tackle at one point, but he's playing D end. They've got They've got the shoulder width to play D-end as freshmen. So you're going to see maybe 4 or 5 of those guys playing as freshmen or redshirt freshmen behind the top 2. So nothing is decided about the backup D-ends. We actually have more names now, but the buzz for Chaz Coleman is growing and is a new update in that particular camp battle. I think that's what we got here. Like I said, quarterbacks. You want to know about the QB2 battle? I wrote about it extensively yesterday in the notes. You can go check it out at bluewhiteillustrated.com. That's it for today's show from what I have. So let's see what the Chaz has. The Chaz in Granville the next year at defensive end says Z-Man. Sure. But there's, I think, a lot of names. That's the problem. I don't think it's going to be just those 2 guys. They're going to have four young players. And Zariah Fisher, unless he has a massive season for Penn State and goes pro, which, I don't know about that. But you're going to have one veteran and a slew of really talented young guys. But yeah, Granville and Chaz Coleman, Yvonne Kamaju, and then don't forget about Jalen Harvey and Malachi Williams. They're going to be in that competition as well. The good news for Granville is he got hurt early enough in the year that he should be good for training camp, right? He should be full strength for that time of year. Bad news is he has to lose this year, which is a huge bummer for him, for a guy that works really, really hard. 2 Kids says, T. Frank, not a good gambler, lol. Take some notes from Greg. Absolutely. Terrible gambler. I did not stick to my futures. I should have had a future bet on Chaz Coleman. I should have kept it. I am going to work with Greg. But here's the thing. I don't know that I've ever placed an independent bet in my life. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing as a sportsman in America. Here's the thing. Okay. So talking about this, here's another random tangent to get us out of here. I don't feel old a whole lot. Like physically, I don't ever feel all that old. I'm going to be 35 in a couple weeks. I'm old enough that I remember when gambling was so taboo to talk about in sports. Like, I grew up and was trained in the era of there are separations of church and state between gambling and the sports betting community and sports. And as a journalist, you should have integrity and you should not gamble. I also grew up without a lot of money, and I was very young without a lot of money. After graduating college, I didn't have any money to bet, so I was out of the pool of people who would be good at doing that. So that's kind of the why that nobody asked for. But yeah, I'm terrible at it, and we do need to get Greg on here to have that. I want to have the best bet segment again. I would love to do that again, and I don't know that. I don't know. I can't convince Ryan to do it anymore because, again, Ryan is one of those guys where if he's going to do something, he's going to do it to a great level, and he doesn't have time to do that. So maybe we'll get something with our partner BetMGM. We got a new sports partner. I should see if we can get that done. Mr. Sip says, "Why the AP poll do y'all dirty?" Did they? Penn State second in the AP poll? Is that dirty? You think? Is our Mississippi State fan in the chat, is this the most positive Penn State take we've had on the AP poll? I think it is. I think it absolutely is. Okay, so Penn State fans, now you are all on the clock. We're going to get to this now because we got to have it. Why the AP poll do y'all dirty? Do you think Penn State should have been number one? Question of the day as we got it here on the live show is, should Penn State have been number one? Because Mr. Sip seems to think that's the case. I have heard zero Penn State fans say that Penn State should have been number one here on the show or on the message board or anywhere on the internet. Everyone is, they got to beat the other teams and then they got to make sure they win one of these top 10 games first before they're number two or number one. I haven't heard anyone go, yeah, they should be number one, and suck it. Came from our Mississippi State resident. By the way, I love this diverse community of Ohio State and Mississippi State fans. We need to get some more. We need to get some more random fans here on the channel. I do enjoy that different perspective here. Everyone know I love you all. We're just teasing here as we get out of here. Don't want to make anyone mad. I think it's fair to say that Penn State should be number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I don't know. Who cares? Penn State's going to start playing in 2 weeks, and we'll find out together. That does it for today's show. Recruiting. coming up tomorrow. Lots of things we got to talk about. Where's the quarterback domino falling for Penn State? A guy that was doing great in terms of what we saw of Peter Bork visiting Penn State. I got a lot of videos of him. I watched him throw a lot of passes this summer and the summer before. Not going to be able to use a lot of that video now as he committed to Michigan. So what are the QB dominoes now? That and a bunch of other stuff from Ryan coming up on tomorrow's BWI Live recruiting show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you then.